John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of John Brown. It occurred to me this week, someone informed me that our friends at the Dollop are also doing John Brown. Don't worry, that's a good thing. That means that there's more John Brown. Everyone's brain is broken by the concept of scarcity. Alright, we're going up against liberals who own everything and do the same thing every day, all day. No, there should be a million podcasts about John Brown. I, for one, am excited to have dueling John Brown podcasts with the Dollop. Anyways, today will be the second installment of our series, and also I'm going to talk to a guy from South Carolina who's a disabled socialist and has a cool website called Not Your Inspiration, and has some interesting things to say about being disabled and about the way our culture treats it. I'm opening with the song John Brown's Body that we talked about last week because, well, A, because it's fitting, but also B, because I forgot. Somebody pointed this out to me after last episode went up, that there's actually like an interesting piece of historical information surrounding this song, which is that the actual song started not... They wrote it about a different guy named John Brown. It was a guy died in like some small troop or something, and he just was named John Brown, and so they just sang the song about his body. But then later on, this song became about John Brown. It just fused together. Really weird piece of history. And then what's-her-face wrote it into the Battle Hymn of the Republic based on the song John Brown's Body, which she, took to be about John Brown. And then it became, this much larger deal. Julia Ward Howe is the person who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And then it became fucking, a million other songs. And it became, the fucking DSA goddamn socialist thing you sing when you're drunk and you forget the words to. Isn't that interesting? Anyways, here's part 2. Enjoy.
Into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, 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 not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
What the fuck was I going with this? Oh, so moving on a little bit, I guess John Brown's early adult life is kind of interesting because he's existing during a time when capitalism as we know it is rising, right? Mm. And he is not a good capitalist. And the author of this book makes an argument, I think, that probably makes a lot of sense, which is that the reason he's not a good capitalist is because he doesn't care about profit. He only cares about what he's deemed to be the moral code of God. And so he does things like he doesn't rise and sell or lower and raise his prices according to the market. He just sells things at the price for what he thinks is fair. So he loses money all the time because he sells shit that he doesn't think is up to his own value or code or whatever. And then he also charges way too much for shit because he's like, this is the best fucking piece of leather I've ever made. God put it in me,
Right. Yeah, because he's thinking about things for their actual utility and what they actually mean, and he's not thinking of the exchange value.
Exactly. So this is where a lot of this Emerson stuff comes in to the story because, throughout his life, he's a tanner, he's a farmer, And he really gets caught up in the wool trade, and that's where he gets really fucking like fucked over on money and just digs himself into a huge hole. And Emerson like studied his life and said, or observed his life, I guess, and said that what he was doing was what Emerson believed was sort of this neo-yeoman way of living, which is, what Jefferson started, what the Southerners especially started, was a dream that every, white man would sort of be like he would own an enterprise and a farm. And so the way Emerson referred to it is, don't be a farmer, be a man on the farm. As in, you are like, you don't just farm, you also make clothes and shit. You do all this sort of stuff. You run your own micro society, and your life isn't defined by your work. Your life is defined by like your study and all this stuff. And it's very sovereign citizen-y shit. It's very like Emerson wanted to live in the woods and not be reliant on other parts of society. He wanted to be, his big fucking term is self-reliant, right? And so I think what he understands John Brown to be is attempting somewhat to be like that. But, that's a thing that like doesn't really pan out in history, because eventually there's a scarcity of land and resources and, calls into question all these other things. Like, can everyone be self-sufficient in America? It doesn't make any sense, really,
Yeah. And it also goes back to sort of like a contradiction with Brown in that, as you mentioned, he is very personally anti-racist, and that includes indigenous people. But, settling a place like Kansas, for instance, is going to displace indigenous people. And that, as is the case with everywhere in the United States. So this Jeffersonian ideal may have had some sort of like radical elements to it. But definitely, is part and parcel of American colonialism.
Yeah. I think the way John Brown went about doing it was very inclusive of the people that he moved into land with. And so he had great relationships with like Indians. Like, he would go talk to Indian chiefs, and they would like him so much they would send him, gifts and shit. And they would have like these candid conversations where they'd say like, hey man, as long as you aren't trying to civilize us like other white people, we think you're great. Like, we don't want to be civilized. We like, and this is also, a big part of like the story of colonization.
Here's a new flog to hit your son with.
He wouldn't preach to them?
He wouldn't preach. No, he actually respected their, like, he was not dogmatic in his religion. And I think part of that is the Calvinist like predetermination stuff. He tried to, he had those debates and stuff, and he would give sermons and shit like that to a lot of people, but he didn't try to push it on Native Americans in the same way. And I think it's because he understood that it was like kind of, the colonialization sort of thing, right? Well,
or he thought they were damned.
And I don't think so, because they'd have these casual conversations, and like, they had conversations about how, modernity is this thing that thrust itself upon Indians in America. Like, that's the word I was looking for when I did an episode about the Mexican Revolution. I couldn't quite find it in my head, but modernity was like this tragic element in white people coming to this land and imposing all of these like, technology and all of these orders and shit that go with it onto fucking Indians and indigenous people and shit, like the Aztecs and Mayans and all this stuff. And fucking chief, they would make jokes about it. This one Indian chief said, we don't need that stuff. We're bad enough as it is. He made a little cheeky joke about it, and they fucking laughed, and then that's it, right? So here's what I'm getting at. Like, John Brown did actually expand westward without exploiting other people, but that's also why he went broke, because
okay.
He so he got into the wool trade and basically just like started taking out credit to pay off other credit, and getting caught like on these weird expeditions where he lied and said, I already have the sheep, and then he'd fucking run as hard as possible to another town, try to get the sheep back in time. Just a whole fucking
Right.
trying to pay off your
We've
student
all done
loans. Yeah. But, around this time, he does express sympathy for the labor movement on some level, but he never becomes like an out and out socialist, although some of his children do. And I think maybe the atheism, well, I don't know, that wasn't even part of socialism yet, but I don't know. For whatever reason, he's his own thing, but he does understand the oppression of bosses and things like that. And I think he just chooses, you got a little bit of that like Emersonian anarchy sort of shit where he chooses to just personally recuse himself from the entire situation and just try to just do. My mission is just God, I don't have none of this shit, right?
If I have enough sons, that's like I have my own society.
Yeah, we just use the salmons as money or whatever. There's so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
You trade them.
I'll trade you one dead child for your dead child. So we create a market.
Trade you one dead human named Salmon for a whole bushel of actual salmon.
That's an interesting proposal, and I wonder if it would work.
Yeah, they're called not greenbacks, but like brown back. I don't know.
Pinkbacks.
Pinkbacks.
Don't call them that. Yep.
Freshly minted salmons. In 1832, Dianthe dies of something called childbed fever. No idea. I guess she had just given birth. 1833, the Browns live so since their mother's gone, they just have to. They're so broke, they have to move in with this other family. Eventually, they leave. He doesn't know what to do, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, he's hired a 16-year-old named Mary Day, daughter of a blacksmith named Charlie Day, like from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Yeah,
that's great.
He marries her, the 16-year-old, and has 13 kids.
He's canceled again.
He has 13 kids, 9 of which die. Pretty fucked up. So
I know we've all grown numb to this, but that's an insane number of children.
When you're reading the book, it's like every time you turn a page, and then Salmon the Fourth died of,
the weasels got him.
Yeah. So, like I was saying earlier, I want to talk about his politics a little bit. In the 1820s, he was a Whig, but eventually he was disgusted with the Whig candidates, the pro-slavery Republicans that came into the picture, Andrew Jackson as a Democrat, fucking everyone. And it said that after 30, he just stopped voting. He just was like, my project is not in this thing at all. And that's, maybe part of why he decided to take things in a different direction, right?
Wait, so the Whigs were, because there was the split that became the Republicans. Were were they both sort of like amorphous in the sense that there was pro-slavery, anti-slavery, or the history teacher might know this?
What was the question?
Whigs, were they predominantly abolitionist, or
I'm not really sure.
Okay, never mind. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the exact details because some of my mind starts to blank over when we get to some of the just fucking the Whigs. It happened in this year, and then after that, someone turned.
Yeah,
but
I think I remember them being pro-modernization, and that was one of the divides that we talked about with Matt too. Like Republicans and Whigs wanted to like modernize, like invest in urban economies and stuff, and then the Democrats were just strict agriculturalists, like leave us alone.
Right, but the thing is, and I think this is what happened in this specific point with Brown, is that so a lot of the people that were for abolition were still racist, and a lot of them that were in the parties that were for abolition would get away with still being not for abolition. So, kind of like a Medicare for all sort of issue or something like that. Yeah, and so
abolition for all who want it.
Right.
Yeah.
If you have a great slavery plan, you can keep that.
Right.
I love my private slaves.
Right. My office gives us great slaves, and I'm not willing to maybe get rid of that and try something else out.
So the biggest probably most well-known abolitionist of the time is William Lloyd Garrison, who the name of his association is escaping me, but it's like I don't know. He has a newspaper called The Liberator, and he's, you know what? I think I actually figured it out. The issue I think that Brown kind of wouldn't budge on is that a lot of these people are what's known as a colonizationist. So they still wanted to expand the U.S., but as a white state, and they wanted to end slavery, but they wanted to end it by putting black people on a boat and sending them to Liberia. So there's a difference.
Right.
Compromise.
Yeah.
The difference.
Lincoln was a big proponent of
Colonization.
Black colonization.
Yeah.
That's how Liberia started, right? That's their capital's Monrovia after James Monroe. I know. But
yeah,
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's weird that there's just an American like state in Africa. It's called Liberia, and it's just, you know, fucking Jefferson Street or whatever. I don't know. It's fucking weird. So this is where he sort of starts to split politically with other abolitionists at the time, because he noticed that they're still racist and they still are white supremacist and they still believe in like phrenology and stuff like that, and they still you know want he wants a state where people are treated equal and everyone's allowed to be here and everyone commingles, and a lot of them didn't. They wanted this like, you know, colonizationist shit, and he just starts reading about slave rebellions and stuff and gets really into it. And this is the period in his life when, if you're friends with John Brown, you start to notice he's been spending a lot of time in his garage working on something he won't quite tell you about, you know? Like writing something or building something, kind of all of it, right? And so he spends a lot of time reading about Nat Turner, reading about Indian rebellions, reading about societies known as Maroons, basically black people that escaped slavery and just formed towns in the woods and shit. He's really into Haiti, you know, the story of Haiti being that there was a successful slave rebellion that eventually expelled all other Europeans with the help of the French, and then the French just decided to turn on black people and still be colonialists, and then they fucking expelled the French too, and then they had, you know, black leaders and stuff. I think I got that right. Toussaint, is that what his name is? I don't know. Toussaint. Sorry.
L'ouverture.
Croissant. Okay. to sandwich.
Hello.
He's also really into Cinque, the guy who led the Amistad Rebellion and, you know, took over the slave ship, and then they fucking all got taken when they landed anyway. You know, like the movie.
Bummer.
Does that movie hold up?
I don't know.
Amistad, I
saw it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So he starts to become radicalized within his religious life too, and that has a lot to do with, you know, the DIY, make your own thing, puritanical stuff, I think. And one of the towns he lives in, he moves around a lot in this part of the book, but in one of the towns he lives in, he goes into church and is horrified to see that a black family has been forced to sit in the last pew in the back. And so he just makes a big speech about it and makes a big showing of inviting the family to sit in his pew and then taking him and his children and sitting in the back, right? And the fucking church calls him in the next day and says they want to yell at him about it. And then the way he describes it is that he like just lays the fucking hammer down, and he had some weird quote about it I didn't write down, but it was like, and after that they, you know, fucking fuck them or whatever. So he said that basically he
That's how he said it.
That's how he said it. The phrase is escaping me, but exactly. But basically, one of the tenets that he really stuck to was when he would fight with like people in the church, is that God does not respect the laws of people. Like, God doesn't like you. You're a fucking spider, bitch. You know. And he would go.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you over your 8 legs.
So, you know, he would say it's like if God's law is the end all be all thing, and he's fucking as ready as ever to challenge the church when it comes to this shit. And so a lot of this also comes from like his worship of Oliver Cromwell. It's like one of his big heroes. He sees Cromwell and Nat Turner are kind of his two heroes because, you know, Nat Turner
What a pair.
like starts this slave rebellion in what is it, South Carolina, Virginia, one of those states, where he takes into the night with fucking swords and knives and shit, stabs a bunch of white people, and kind of comes up with this strategy to retreat into the woods. And it's very successful, and it's very terrifying to white people. And then it's unsuccessful. And they say like John Brown and Nat Turner went to the gallows with the same frankness and just accepting, and they're just like, fucking would do it again 10 times over. Fuck you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the quote was Nat Turner was asked like, are you still how are you following God's law if you're getting in trouble now, if you're getting executed? And his response was Christ not crucified?
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Interesting about Nat Turner is that he was a house slave. So there was, I don't know, Malcolm X's thing about the field and the house.
oh, interesting.
Mm.
The
Well, you know,
house slaves are-
As Brother Bill Maher said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and a large part of the reason he loved Nat Turner so much was like tactical. Like he studied what Nat Turner did, and he got really obsessed with the idea of retreating into the woods and then sort of like striking in the darkness from there, and you know, having like a network of safety in the wilderness, and also, you know, an underground railroad type system to help people that didn't want to fight get out of there, while he formulated like his battalion or whatever. And he also, the reason it's, I think Cromwell and Nat Turner are both relevant in his mind, I guess, as his two like figures, is because they both committed acts of political violence that is referred to by some historians or whoever the fuck studies this sort of thing as literally the term is good terrorism. So the argument is that he, you know, that what Nat Turner did was justified, which I think is pretty easy to make. And then he also really thinks that what Cromwell did was justified because he's a Puritan psycho. So Cromwell overthrew and beheaded Charles the First, I think. Am I getting that right? And then
Nice.
he also, and you know, it was like a revolution. He chopped the king's head off, like pretty cool because, you know, I guess again, I don't know a lot about the theology stuff, but what happened, I guess they were feeling an oppression from this king, right? And then he just went into Ireland and killed a bunch of fucking Catholics, and John Brown saw that as fucking justifiable as Nat Turner, I guess. I don't know about any of that
Wow. Is this your man?
shit.
Well, it's good. Yeah, because like we were saying earlier, like both of these guys, the predominant historical view, especially with like Southern American historians for, you know, decades after this, was like, oh, well, they set the movement back. Because of those guys, if it weren't for them, we would have gotten abolition sooner, which is total nonsense and is, you know, meant to give credence to this narrative that we got to wait things out. You got to go for the incremental change and be patient and not actually, you know, treat these situations with the gravity they deserve sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, slavery would have ended it itself. And to back up my argument, here's a completely disprovable and anachronistic fact about Frederick Douglass. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Let's see. So the next thing that happened is in 1837, an editor of an abolitionist newspaper, I think, named Elijah Lovejoy, is murdered in St. Louis by a mob of pro-slavery, like just people or whatever. They just destroy his printing press. There's a lot of fucking with, God, the Zapatista people, or the not Zapatista, but the Mexican anarchists, the Magone brothers, Stalin, and John Brown. Three things that we've covered on this show in like a fairly biographical sense. Same shit keeps happening to these fucking people. They get their office busted into and their printing press destroyed. So
Right. Because that's their podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
is
when
why-
we get to Potawatomi, that's also an issue.
Right. We'll get there pretty soon. But yeah, so the stuff starts to happen where they're starting to actually kill abolitionists, and there's another instance where they fucking they tar and feather one guy. They tie one guy to a raft with a bunch of like signs on it that just say old timey fucking owns on him, and then just send him away.
You gotta wonder, like, compared to being tarred and feathered, if the guy on the raft is like, well,
Yeah.
it could be worse.
You got rafted.
But
I'm owned on the raft.
he's starting to notice the violence that's coming down on abolitionists and also on like black people after these slave rebellions where they're just being, just fucking brutally murdered if you get caught, and you don't win your rebellion or whatever. I mean, people chained to posts, just left to starve to death and shit, and like old-timey medieval, the fucking wheel thing that they put you on and shit. Horrible stuff, right? But as all this stuff is happening, it causes a split where it causes abolitionists at large to become non-resistant, right? They're saying, oh, there's so much violence happening. We've provoked the violence. If we have to do this pacifism thing in order to, then they'll never be able to justify attacking us or whatever.
Fucking Quakers.
Yeah. And
but there's also violence
suck.
on the other side, as as the Underground Railroad kind of gets more efficient and more slaves are running away. You had the slave catchers coming up north and hunting for slaves, and there were situations where slave catchers and once a slave holder was murdered in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
Right. Was it in the Supreme Court? Was there a decision about slave catchers? Right.
I don't remember.
Okay, I'm thinking of Dred Scott. Maybe.
Dred Scott.
Yeah.
No.
yeah, I mean, there's a couple
Good
of
decision.
national laws regarding escaped slaves and things like that. I can't really rattle them off the top of my head, but they definitely play into this sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
While Freddie D was publicly a pacifist, he said in his private letters, the only thing that will stop the Fugitive Slave Act is a few dead slave catchers.
Cool.
Ooh,
Very cool.
Freddie.
Freddie D also
You're not a spider, are you?
Freddie D also meets with John Brown, right? And they sit down and they have this conversation where John Brown fucking Game of Thrones is a map across the table and is pushing shit around on it, and he's explaining, I read about Nat Turner all the time, and I've got this big plan, and I'm a crazy religious person, and I believe that the Allegheny Mountains were put here by God to help me hide slaves as I mount an attack on Harper's Ferry, right? And Frederick Douglass is like, damn, and that's kind of it. But
Cool map.
yeah, Frederick Douglass is, like you said, I mean, he kind of expresses a little bit of apprehension about the violence, but clearly he goes on to like endorse John Brown after the raid on Harper's Ferry, right? And so in building up to and imagining this raid that he's eventually going to be the focal point of his life, he identifies the target Harper's Ferry for a number of reasons. One of them is that that's where all the motherfucking arms are made, right?
Get them guns.
Yeah. They want to take over the guns, and he wants to destroy a lot of them. So his plan is to take a bunch of fucking rifles, arm his men, arm all the slaves, and then destroy all of the rifles and the machinery used to make them in his wake. That way they can just sort of like, to have the upper hand from that point. The other reason is because that is where the great-grandnephew of General George Washington lives. And part of his plan is to break into whatever the fuck this guy's Washington's house is with a bunch of freed black dudes and find what he knows to be in his possession, which is George Washington's sword and revolver, right? And his plan is to steal it and give it to black people just to make a spectacle over it, which is so good.
Awesome.
Right? So fucking funny. He's also doing things at this time like he's reading about a lot of the other, abolitionists at the time that approach violence, or at least talk about it, or maybe get somewhere closer than like the abolitionists who now as a movement are fairly pacifistic. So one of the other guys he likes is named the Branded Hand. he's this sailor who basically was born in can't remember off the top of my head, but I think in West Indies or something like that. But he's an American. He comes back. He's just living in the Florida Keys. He's got a boat. And he gets into abolitionist shit, and one night, a bunch of freed slaves, or a bunch of escaped slaves, walk up to him, and they start talking to him, and they go, "Hey, man, don't you think that we would do an American Revolution, like, if we had the means? Like, we're the same as Americans. Like, that's why you should help us." And he's just like, "Yeah, that makes sense. Get in my boat." And so he gets in the boat, and he's just kind of trying to escape to an island with them, and they get caught, and the military brands the letters SS onto his hand, and he's in jail for a year. And when he gets out, he's just this hardcore abolitionist, like, Underground Railroad agent with they call him.
What does SS stand for?
I couldn't find it. It's not in the book, but somebody writing about him afterwards said,
Scallywag shit.
Super scallywag.
Super
Our worst enunciation.
There's a poem about him where I can't remember who wrote it, but he's saying, like, it actually stands for salvation of, but I don't fucking know, but everyone took creative license with it. But anyway, the Branded Hand, that's pretty cool. There's also like an anarchist named Lysander Spooner, who he sort of has a back and forth with, who, they have similar ideas, but they ultimately disagree in terms of the violence. But after John Brown went to jail after Harper's Ferry, Lysander Spooner did like start a fund to basically break him out of prison. They just didn't have enough money. So
classic anarchist.
One of the right. Like, oh man, we just need a little bit of extra. Okay,
Dude, we're gonna we'll all make a song and we'll have a punk mixtape, and then that's gonna get the money to get John out.
Yeah, and they're just hanging him. At one point, he forms a militia called the League of Gileadites, who are a bunch of local black men he's convinced to form a small army with him. The reason he calls them the League of Gileadites is because from the fucking Old Testament, he names them after this thing called Mount Gilead, which is like where some crazy shit that he cares about happens involving like Israel and people being tested and shit. He's just...
It's also where the Handmaid's Tale happens.
Interesting.
Really?
Gilead.
Learning can be fun.
Wait.
And it's also the maker of Remdesivir.
Right. It's the company that's trying to form a monopoly on the coronavirus vaccine.
Yeah.
And the AIDS medicine.
Oh my god.
I don't think he knew that, though. I mean,
Too bad we don't have John Brown around to raid that place.
Fuck yeah. He'd be like, wear a mask. Why won't you wear a mask?
Where's your mask?
He'd flog everyone without a mask.
Yeah. He totally would have been one of those people. So, it's. I mean, he's a nerd, like with this God stuff, because he's finding freed black men, and then just like convincing them to join a gang where the theme is your archangels, right? And
I'm sold.
He's really into the spears and the swords and stuff. He constantly references this hymn from the Bible called "Blow Ye the Trumpet Blow," which is what they played at his funeral. And he's basically becoming more and more radical, especially during a time when he lives in a place called North Elba. And North Elba it's this stretch of land where a lot of these do-it-yourself, do whatever you want, weirdo cults are happening. And outside of even the Quaker stuff and the Mormon stuff, there are a lot of, oddly enough, like free love, just hippie societies. There are cults that get really far from the Jesus and just really into like the polyamory and shit.
Okay.
One of them is called Oneida. They're one of the more famous ones that basically, and the point of these societies is utopianism. You know, you're in this new land. There's plenty of space. You can go out into a field, start your own fucking town if you want, and build just a society all on your own. And what's interesting is Sean has a good history as a weapon on like utopia, and he talks about this a lot, like Oneida specifically. But like Oneida eventually became a silverware company, and then they just packed up the cult town, and the only way to make it make sense anymore was it to become a company that just sells silverware. And there's like three.
Yeah, I'm gonna wanna wash that silverware a few times before I use it. If you know what I mean.
Boom.
But this is where like, you know, Cutco and shit like that comes from. It's like, why is it? Oh, this is a family company that's been here for 100 years. You know, it's because it used to not be about the silverware at all. That was just the only way to sustain the whatever the fuck was going on out there, right? But John Brown is living in his own version of that, and there's a famous author who comes through and is like,
Redpath.
Who?
Redpath? Oh no, somebody else. Go.
I don't know. I forgot the person's name. But there's an author that comes through and writes a lot about how they had like breakfast with John and his family, and they're just like horrified because there's just some black guy, and he's just like, oh hey, Mr. whatever his last. He calls him Mr. and then his last name, and he sits down and they all eat like equals, and it's just the weirdest thing that this author has ever seen, you know. And Brown just does stuff like that where, you know, he either isn't aware of how weird the situation is to other white people, or he's purposely like, what's so weird about this, man? You want to say it, you know, like puts them in that situation.
Right. He's triggering them.
Yeah. You triggered.
He's asking if they're triggered, and then they make the soy face.
Yeah. He hates the soy face.
If there's one thing I can't stand, it's that soy face.
So around the time he's living here, this is when he's planning the raid on Harper's Ferry, and he almost goes through with it like about 4 years earlier. But he stopped because he asks his men in his militia who are black, you know, their advice, and they talk him out of it, and they tell him, you should probably focus on Kansas right now, because this is during a time when Kansas is like becoming a state. This is where I'm like, fuck. If I was a better podcaster, I'd have the details on this. But the general idea of what's going on is that, you know, it's a newly formed state, and it's a hotly contested area in the battle for slavery. And so,
It's because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act.
Thank you, history teacher.
1857. I'm sorry. 1854? I'm sorry, I don't know the date. But they basically
We're going to get our people on that. We've got a research team.
They basically decided, like, in Congress, what are we going to do with these territories? How are we going to decide if we're going to allow slavery there or not? And so they had this brilliant idea to have popular sovereignty, which means basically people would vote on it. So the natural thing that would have happened was people would pour into the region to get the state to be, you know, pro-slavery or a free state, naturally leading to violence.
It was 54, by the way.
54. I got it right.
I was going to guess 54. Okay. Well, so yeah, that's actually why this becomes a hotly contested area, because it's this new space that has popular sovereignty. And so people are migrating to it to try to win this, the other war, the war of, are we going to have fucking slavery or not? And this becomes an issue that he decides, like, okay, due to some business dealings, I'm in a situation where I'm like, I got to choose between staying here, going to Harper's Ferry, or going to Kansas. And he decides to go to Kansas, but he sends his sons first. And this is where we're going to get into this concept of border ruffians. So there are these people who live in, like, Missouri who are going, like you said, over the border into Kansas to vote in what is not entirely a legitimate system because they're not citizens of Kansas, and they are enacting all these laws that are really, really, really hardcore pro-slavery laws, but they're so hardcore that they're, like, not even, it's like a joke. Like, no one would, they're saying it, they're voting for laws where it, like, it's legal to kill an abolitionist on sight, and no one's really enforcing them because it's, like, pretty understood to be, like, crazy, but there's this just contingent of border ruffians who are all these, like, drunk riverboat guys who carry revolvers and drink whiskey and curse.
Right, not in an endearing way.
Yeah. And they're so offensive to the Browns because, they're uptight religious people. So here's what happens, right? Owen, Frederick, and Salmon get on a steamboat called the New Lucy. It's full of border ruffians, and they're basically on a boat that's going down the Missouri River that's going to land them in Kansas so they can set up the first outpost for the Browns to move into Kansas to do, like, political action. The three sons are on the New Lucy, and it's full of these crazy riverboat gambler guys, and then one of them has a son named Austin who dies of cholera, as children are wont to do. And one night, the steamboat is stopped, and so they go outside onto the ground to bury Austin, their dead cholera child, in the middle of a lightning thunderstorm. And as a joke, the captain of the boat leaves them in just
As a joke.
yeah.
That is very funny. I mean, context is everything, but your child's funeral is ruined now.
I mean, just a bunch of drunk, laughing, like, Wild Wild West steampunk characters just taking off on a boat, like, ha ha ha, gotcha.
I love how they were like, let's lighten the mood and
Right.
make them think that they're gonna die too.
The New Lucy is supposed to be a fun ship, Vibe check on the Lucy. Let's get rid of this fucking giant family of god rappers.
Yeah.
So
Wait, so do they get stuck there?
no, they just got on a wagon. They found a wagon, and then they fucking got to Kansas. And by the time they got to
So
Kansas,
it wasn't a joke. The boat didn't come back.
no, I mean, in the book, at least according to this guy's research, the captain did it as a joke. He thought it was funny because
Right.
because I think what's going on is that they were stuck on a fucking boat with these Puritans, but the boat's full of these border ruffians who are all fun, drunk people who are like, yeah, they're pro-slavery and they're violent and they're crass and stuff. And they already hate them for political reasons, but they also just hate them probably for personality reasons. So they just
Because they're ruffians.
fucking
They're damned ruffians.
leave them out in the
And wait,
wilderness.
they were pro-slavery.
The border,
Yes, they're ruffians.
the border ruffians. Yes, I mean that's why
They're
they.
nasty ruffians.
Okay, now I get it.
So yeah, and it's like people are starting to hear about the Browns, so they might even know what they're up to. And
This is also just a classic example of people not knowing what a joke is.
Yeah. He
um,
committed to a bit there.
Yeah, the punchline was when your child died of cholera.
Right.
So
And
technically,
the act
that was
out is
attack.
abandoning them in the funeral.
Are you triggered by my joke? You triggered? So, yeah, what happens next is that John Brown leaves later, and on his way, he stops in Ohio to give some slavery speeches. He just kind of gives speeches everywhere he goes, and stock up on guns because he's starting to, get his plans together. So he buys some rifles, some revolvers, and a bunch of heavy, short broadswords for some reason.
Ooh.
Right?
Heavy short. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you get somebody really close to you, you can jam it in their guts and.
Is this to fight in a cave, maybe?
We'll find out. These come back into the picture later. So as they, they're making their way into Kansas, the violence is really ramping up. And there is a free stater named Reese P. Brown who's violently murdered. They stab him a bunch of times and leave him on his wife's doorstep, or on his own doorstep where his family lives.
Right. As a joke.
As a joke.
Better than the boat one.
The caning of Sumner happens, which is, basically a pro-slavery politician listens to, I don't even know if he listened to it, he heard another politician, Sumner, give a speech in which he does like a clever joke about the guy, and so the pro-slavery politician just beats the shit out of him at his desk with his cane.
With a cane, yeah.
He calls the slave power states whores.
Ooh.
That's what he says. Like, as a metaphor, and that's why he gets his ass beat.
What's the full metaphor? That they're working for the slave, they're like blowing the slave owners?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Oh.
Good bit.
That's the thing, right? He gets a little bit, he roasts the roast master, and then you find out it's not a two-way street, right? You're not allowed to be mean back. And that creates like an interesting power dynamic, right? So what's going on here at the time is that all of the pro-slave propaganda against the abolitionists in Kansas is that they're pussies, right? And that they basically take Lawrence and they're met with zero resistance. And so they celebrate afterwards and they're like, yeah, these abolitionist pussies are not going to do shit. Like, we can just take over their towns and stuff. And this makes
Brown was disappointed in them too. He thought they were pussies too.
Exactly. Well, it's made John Brown madder and madder because he was like, you're proving them right. Like, why are you fucking not fighting back? And I guess the context in which his murders occur is that the violence is ramping up to the point where I think John Brown went on to explain what he did as self-defense, even though he sought out and killed a couple people. Things were happening like, all these people were getting stabbed and lynched and stuff like that. And there were these black laws in place where technically it was legal to murder someone if they just were an abolitionist at all. And there is this... So he goes undercover into a pro-slavery militia at one point, and the story is that he overhears them talking about him and describing how they're like, if I ever see those Browns, I will kill them, But they say it like Yosemite Sam or some shit because of the time.
Right, and he's there with like a strap-on mustache, like, yes, me too.
Yeah.
I'm salmon. I love slavery.
So all this sort of comes to a head when this pro-slavery judge named John P. Cato issues warrants for the entire Brown family. And the Browns show up to court, but with basically the express interest of going like, what the fuck are you going to do about it? You can't enforce these laws. And there's a moment here where his kids are starting to let me see if I can find the fucking quote. Like, his kids are like kind of put in a weird situation because they're like, wait, like, what, we're gonna do what, you know? And here's the line from the book. His sons John and Jason never forget the day when John Brown persuaded family members to pledge themselves to armed warfare against slavery. The two were sitting by the fire with Owen and Mother when their father addressed them soberly. As John Jr. recalled, he told the four of his determination to make war on slavery, not such war as was equally the purpose of the non-resistant abolitionists, but war by force and arms. He said he had long entertained such a purpose. He asked the four if they were willing to make a common cause with him in doing all in our power to break the jaws of the wicked and pluck the spoil out of his teeth. After they assented, he kneeled in prayer and asked each to take an oath of secrecy and devotion to the purpose of fighting slavery by force and arms to the extent of our ability. And then they were like, what is wrong with Dad?
Right. You see, boys, slavery is a spider. Yeah, it's so awkward because you kind of have to do it. Or just not talk to your dad ever again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're starting to reflect on, like, but they're also, like, you know, a pretty patriarchal family. And it's interesting, though, because, like, the people that went over to John Brown's house would say that he was pretty good on gender stuff. Like, all the kids did the same chores equally and stuff. But he still was like, I'm the father, right? And
right.
So they kind of just had to do what he said, I think. And as this court case is happening, he's running out into the street and yelling like the names of his militia and stuff and going, fuck around and find out, like do something about it. And no one arrests anyone. And later on, he identifies 3 different houses, and he comes and gets his children, and he's got a wild look in his eye, and he's like, get the guns, get the fucking swords. We're going to go do this. And, you know, we're going to do a second part to this, so if I miss some of the specific parts of the story of why it was these specific guys, maybe I'll get to that next week. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly.
But before this, you also have the sack of Lawrence, where they destroy the printing presses.
Right. Okay. So let's stop real quick and round up before we get to the actual Potawatomi. How the fuck is it pronounced?
Potawatomi.
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 Yeah.
Oh, it's just heating up. Oh boy.
So I guess, Naomi, can you provide any specific background context, like for example, the sack of Lawrence?
Yeah. So about 800 or 1,000 border ruffians went to the town of Lawrence. They met with like little or no resistance, and Brown's sons were there at that time.
Wow.
And
so that's like another 800 to 1,000 of them.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people were in the town, but that's how many people came and tried to destroy the town. And they destroyed some of the buildings. And this was the same year that the caning of Sumner happened. So all these things happened at once. And that's what led to this midnight massacre in Potawatomi.
Yeah, and I mean, there was so much violence being normalized in the South on behalf of slavery, and this portrayal of the abolitionists in the North as being pussies, right, as being pacifists and pushovers, and more license being felt, you know, not just to enact the violence of slavery, but to just kick anyone's ass who disagrees with you, kill them, terrorize them and their family. Starts to reach kind of a boiling point, right? So John Brown decides he's going to make like his hero Nat Turner and descend in the night with swords that he bought last week on the way to fucking Kansas, right? And so
little ones.
They go to little blunty broadswords, like Renaissance fair swords,
small wide swords,
and like the swords, the symbolism of this is archangel shit, right? So he's never before gone straight up into. I mean, he's gone into like sort of like battles before, to some extent, like skirmishes and things like that. But this is an assassination. I mean, they show up to this guy's house. They do this basically 3 separate houses. They show up, they bang on the door as loud as possible. The person wakes up, and then they say, like, could you give me directions to this other house I'm trying to find? And, like, they won't answer the door, and they just goad him into coming outside and going, could you just help me? I need directions. And when the person comes outside, they fucking aim the guns at him and go, you're being imprisoned for, pro-slavery terrorism or whatever. And they will, like, basically tie the person's hands behind their back, put them on a horse, and go tell their family we're taking them, to be imprisoned. And then they just stop, like, halfway down the road. And John Brown didn't do it, man. He told his kids to do it. He put a sword in John Jr. and Salmon's hand. I think it was Owen and Salmon. I think John Jr. might not have been there. Doesn't matter. He's got 20 fucking kids. But Salmon and Owen were there for sure. And he has them just...
Declan.
He has them hack the shit out of these dudes with Renaissance fair swords, and like they're found the next day just like half in the river with just their brains coming out and shit, and like hands cut off and stuff, and
their faces mutilated.
Yeah, and what they said is that they were able to do this 3 times in the same night. Interestingly enough, the third assassination took place after the stroke of midnight on Saturday, which meant it was technically Sunday, which normally John Brown doesn't do shit on Sunday.
Just to stop with the sword like in the guy, just like a little bit. It's like
yeah. You got lucky.
Drop it.
Orthodox person asking you to push the elevator button.
Yeah.
Can you stab this guy, please?
Well, you got to think by the third one they go do, they got to be covered in brains. Just trying to get the guy to come outside, be like, I spilled something and I need directions.
I mean, he could have been like, you're lucky it's brunch o'clock, I gotta go. But he's fucking decided to just go through with it and kill the third guy. And the way the Sons tell the story is that the adrenaline carried them through the entire endeavor, but as soon as it wore off, Salmon was just throwing up like a rookie cop. Like, what did we just do?
Right. Well, because they were mutilating and murdering strangers with swords, you mean?
Yeah. He's just like, and they start to ask their father, was it okay what we did? And throughout the rest of his life, he just sort of like, this is where the argument for insanity kind of makes sense, because he gives different answers on it, or he just feels guilty and he says, well, but not me, God. What God wanted me to do it and all this stuff.
Right.
He denied being there for a while.
Yeah, sometimes he denied being there, but the defense.
That was Salmon. Salmon's crazy.
Yeah. But the thing he said that actually makes sense to some level is that it was an act of self-defense, which, I mean, this is during a time and place when people were actively plotting to murder him and telling him they were going to do it because of, he was an abolitionist, and, it was legal to murder an abolitionist. So that's where
right. He correctly deduced that he was at war and just acted first, but also he might have separately been crazy as a bag of cats.
Entirely possible he was a serial killer who was on the right side of history,
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm not sure, like, the targets weren't chosen very carefully. Like, I think it was kind of random, no?
Well, that's the part where I was struggling to get my notes together right before we recorded this, and I'm going to have to just answer that question on the next episode, because I want to say those, like, 3 of those guys were at his court case, and I want to say there's a direct reason for why he chose them, but I can't tell you what it is because I forgot.
Now, is it random, or did God choose them? Consider that.
The chosen people.
Yeah, I mean, there is kind of an argument in his mind of like, well, anything that was going to happen is predetermined. I mean, even after the raid on Harper's Ferry, he did not feel remorseful that it didn't work, because the fact that immediately upon assessing that it didn't work, he just said, well, then God didn't want it to work. Which is
he
also
blamed Frederick Douglass for not joining him.
for not hiving.
Yeah.
That damn Freddie D.
If Noam Chomsky would sign my letter, this wouldn't be a problem.
He would also say that when he would lose money. Him and his father both, when they were just lost shit tons of money, they'd be like, well, I suppose the Lord wants me to be poor today. Shit.
Jesus does not want me to buy a boat.
Anyways, that's where I'm kind of let up, and then next week we'll do the rest of the story through the Harper's Ferry raid. But yeah, man,
right.
First blood with fucking swords. Oh, also, I forgot. Apparently the story goes, he did shoot the final guy directly in the head, execution style, which is really cool.
Nice.
Sick.
Yeah.
Cool. Are you going to talk about Asarawami?
Didn't get to it, but we will. And if you want to talk about it right now, we
Don't
can.
spoil it for Jake.
Should I not spoil it?
Jake is on episode 3 of John Brown, the 6-part miniseries.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually going to be one that we honestly should get some dollars from for getting people John Brown hungry. The Ethan Hawke
Right, John
miniseries
Brown
is coming up.
hungry.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Those precious plugs.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, all I wanted to say about Osawatomie is that it was a shrewd military victory that Brown had later by defending a town with very few people, opposed to a lot of border ruffians. And that's what gave him this immense fame right after Potawatomi. And he totally disassociated from that event. And he was just like, I'm the guy from Osawatomie.
What?
You're getting it confused.
Potawatomi? No. Osawatomie.
Oh, damn. You got me feeling John Brown hungry.
All right, as the saying goes.
The saying we all use.
Well, that was a big, long fucking episode. That's all
That
I
was
gotta say.
awesome.
I'm John Brown exhausted, to be honest with you. Might even say
browned out?
John Brown horny.
Hey.
John Brown's
Hey.
body.
Feeling John Brown horny. Well,
Yeah.
I am excited for next week's events where we see what happens in the John Brown trilogy.
Next time on Dragon Ball Z. You know?
Yeah.
Will John Brown end slavery? Will the border ruffians return?
Yeah. This is the steampunk hooligans. I think they're one of my favorite characters. They suck. All right, well, anyone want to plug anything before we get out of here?
I have a plug, actually. The NFL team in the Washington, D.C. area is considering changing their name. And I have been a longstanding proponent of changing it to the Hogs because there is a history within the franchise. The offensive linemen in the 1980s were called the Hogs. They have a sort of gender fluid fan group called the Hogettes, men who wear dresses and pig noses to the games. Perfect name, Hogs. And I'm going to be so upset if they choose any other name to replace
So you gotta
Redskins.
vote for it or something?
At them on social media. Tell them we want Hogs. We want the name to be the Hogs. That's my plug.
That's a good plug.
Good plug. My other podcast is Why You Mad. Sign up for our Patreon. More of this shit on Patreon. That's it.
More on Patreon. Follow me on Twitter at Patak Jokes. Listen to my other podcast, Ballin' Out Super, where we recap the events of Dragon Ball Z. Very similar to John Brown. And
I'm
that's it
at
for me.
Naomi Karavani.
All right. His anti-racism is 5,000. His God level is rising.
Jewish Frieza?
I
What are
don't
you
know.
doing?
I don't know why I made him that voice.
Oh, God. He's the strongest warrior I've ever seen.
All right, well, let's Let's get out of here before that bit goes any further.
Saying monkeys are out of control.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on. It's finished.
Finished.
Let's do some poppers, y'all.
Hell yeah. Wait, actually, the podcast isn't over. There's one more part. It's another interview, and then it's over. Okay, bye. Now, joining me on the show is Adam from Not Your Inspiration. Adam, tell my listeners who you are and what your organization is.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. My name is Adam Fogel Naughton, Adam F. Naughton, and I guess you could call it an organization. It's I don't know what to call it, but it's a project, I think, is probably the best description. NotYourInspiration.org, the hashtag NotYourInspiration. It's something that has kind of been my COVID quarantine project, so to speak. At the beginning of all this, I heard someone saying something about like, what are you going to have to show at the end of all this quarantine or something? And I was like, yeah, okay, well, maybe I should do something. So I'd been getting bombarded on
this
Twitter.
This is your Macbeth or whatever the fuck the meme
right,
was.
Exactly, yeah. So I've been fucking getting bombarded on Twitter with these ads. This is probably March. It's when all the COVID stuff began, which seems like 20 years ago. But I was getting bombarded on Twitter for these advertisements sponsored by Hyundai USA with a clip from the Ellen Show. And it was this mother in the audience. Her daughter had cerebral palsy and had just kind of recently learned how to walk for the first time with crutches, and so Ellen's playing this clip, and they bring the mom up and they talk about how inspiring this is, and oh my God, this is amazing, and Usher's up there for some fucking reason, I'm still not sure why, and they bring this woman up and basically give her a job, as I think what they ended up giving her, which in itself is insulting, but I mean, a shit job at a Hyundai dealership or something. But what really upset me and upsets a lot of other disabled people about that kind of shit is that it doesn't help us. It's extremely unhelpful for us. It has a name that was coined by the late great Stella Young. She gave a TED talk in 2014, shortly before she died, that it's 9 minutes long. Everyone needs to go watch it, listen to it. But in that talk, she really coined the term inspiration porn, and essentially defined inspiration porn as any attempt by non-disabled people to use our struggle as disabled people to make themselves feel better, which is in essence,
people would never do that. What do you mean?
Right. Yeah, no, fucking never. And so, that, that was the core of what really frustrated me about that clip is that it sends just an absolute shit message to those of us who can't ever get up and walk, who can't, I'm not going to get up and I have spinal muscular atrophy. I'm going to be this way, even with a cure or whatever in the future. I'm going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So, I've accepted it. It's a part of my life. It's a part of who I am. And to be bombarded with information like that says, you need to overcome that. It really wears you down after a while, especially when you're a kid seeing shit like that on TV. You come home from school, you turn on Ellen, and you think about a girl who's similar to that girl in that clip, who's like me though, and you're not going to walk, right? It's just the likelihood is near zero. The message it sends to her is you're nothing. You're not good enough. You're not going to be able to overcome this. This is what we celebrate. We celebrate the people who overcome this shit. But ultimately, what's really gross about it is that it's purely exploitative, and it's purely non-disabled people using us just to make themselves feel better. Oh shit, man, look what that girl had to go through. I am so fucking happy I am not her, right? And that may make you feel better, but then this is where like radical empathy is something that is huge to me. Like I immediately think, what is it like for that girl? What's it like for the girl that is on the other side of that you're saying, I'm glad I'm not you. And as the person who has been that girl a shitload of times, like does not feel good. It does not feel good at all. I'm working on something right now. My next piece is going to be about this picture that keeps fucking recirculating of a kid. I forget his name right now. I'm still like researching. Matthew Stanford Robeson. He died in 1999, but he was he was like 10 years old when he died, I think, but he had a number of disabilities, and his father made him a gravestone that's basically a picture of like a kid like floating out of his wheelchair into the sky.
Oh my God.
And so like, I mean, like the father's intent, like, I feel for the guy, right? It's like, but this fucking picture continues to pop up over and over again on the internet. The first time I think I remember it was probably like 2008, 2009. But then I remember like 2013, and then like 4 years later, and then just earlier this month, and this is why I like writing about it. Just earlier this month, it went viral on Reddit again. It like every 3 or 4 years, it gets like 100,000 upvotes on Reddit. Like someone will post it and be like, "This father's son," and but well, the problem with that image is that it sends a very clear message to us that the only way you're ever going to be free of this burden, and burden is the word that's often used to describe what he's overcoming. The only way you are ever going to be free of this burden is by dying. And conversely, the best thing you can do for us is to die. You want to help society, die. That's essentially the message that I internalize when I see something like that. And a lot of disabled people do. And I did when I was a kid. And it definitely led me to some very dark places. I mean, that was a very difficult time in my life, and being bombarded constantly with messages like that, where I was the person that wasn't as good, was not helpful at all, man. It really wasn't.
Yeah, you see a lot of that similar messaging in like early, a lot of stuff that's still going, autism stuff, where the message is like, we're going to fix you or something, or someday you'll be better. And it's like, no, we're asking for a world where, this is normal and you're not weird about it. You know?
How about I just am who I am? And like, for sure, let's fucking invest in medicine, right? Like I'm all for that. Like, that's wonderful. But that isn't the only part of disability. And that gets down to something deeper. And essentially where this project has gone, this has really evolved far beyond inspiration porn now at this point, to where I've really started to probe the economic and social systems of oppression that continue to keep disabled people at the absolute bottom of our hierarchies, and try to talk about what that actually means in real terms for real people trying to just live real normal lives. We're often thought of as these one-dimensional people, and that's another aspect of this inspiration porn, is it just paints us as these flat fucking two-dimensional characters, right? And like, I'm not. I'm a dude in a wheelchair who has spinal muscular atrophy, and that may be the first thing you notice about me is my big ass wheelchair, but like, I'm also dad. Like, I love jam bands, like I like history. Like, I have a lot of like, I'm a person too, Yeah,
well, I'm going to take a little bit of an issue with the jam band thing, but I'm on board for it.
That's fine. We can have that discussion, but like,
music needs rules.
To be thought of as just a person in that conversation, and not like, oh, the crippled dude over there in the corner, right? Like I could be at that table, and a lot of the times we're not at the table, we're not where decisions are made, especially decisions about us. A lot of government entitlement programs and disability charities are run by people who don't actually have disabilities. So the fact of the matter is that only 1 in 5 Americans can actually seek the means to survive through the employment system. where a lot of where this project has led me is into a lot of research that Marta Russell did. Unfortunately, she died in 2013, but she was incredible. A very, very great activist who was, as far as I can tell, one of the very few people who's ever really worked like at the intersection of disability and socialist theory, like in the modern era, and in the way we interpret disability, like in the 21st century. But there haven't been a lot of people who worked at that area. So I started to kind of realize that when I was unfolding wherever this project was going to go, like, because, you know, the premise that I came to is with inspiration porn is that it is the result of the competitive structures in which we live. Like, that shit isn't necessary in a cooperative society, right? Like, if we live in a democratic, equal, just, cooperative society where I have autonomy over myself and I can make decisions that impact me. I get to make those decisions. In that system, like, there's no need for shit like inspiration porn. Like, it only exists as a byproduct of this shitty competitive world that we live in, where Hyundai has to take our struggles and package them in a way that's going to help them sell cars, while Ellen can also make her audience feel good at the same time, and everybody makes a buck. And then meanwhile, we suffer, right? Like, nothing happens for us, and we get the shit end of that. We have so ultimately in that world, a cooperative hand-in-hand world where we're like, hey, how can we help each other? There's no need for it. So that premise that I kind of took, that I firmly believe that this crap, this garbage, stuff like this, it comes out of capitalism and out of competitive economies and competitive systems of power, and that the only way we're ever going to actually rid ourselves of this shit and the real stuff, the real crap we have to live with on a daily basis, is by getting rid of those competitive systems entirely. Like, we have to absolutely gut that shit, throw it out, get rid of it, and start with something cooperative, because otherwise we as disabled people are going to be fighting these same battles forever. And we're going to lose. We continue to lose because we're physically disadvantaged. We're stuck. We're pushed economically to the margins, to the sideline. It is a daunting task just to make any progress. I got my favorite bumper sticker right here that adapt one of the few radical like leftist disabled organizations. They're not even really that anymore that exist. But I need to go put this on my car. But it basically says ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is now 30 years old, to boldly go where everyone else has gone before. Like, that's basically what we're fucking trying to do, right? We're stuck economically, systemically. We are stuck out of the system, and that's not an accident. It's by design. It's by design. So that's really the work that I'm trying to like explore on this project, in a not like academic-y ivory towery way, but in this kind of conversational, like, hey, this shit actually does impact my life, and it impacts other disabled people as well. And the fact that I'm a disabled person who can advocate for myself, I think makes it even more important that I do so for the other people who may not be able to.
Yeah, well, that's a much more admirable project than I guess what I think. See, you said this is based off of having inspired by having seen those Ellen ads targeted at you.
Yeah.
Well, I think you just reminded me of something.
It was like a whole campaign too, man. It was like you clicked on it, there were like 5, 6, 7 different tweets that they were like promoting with different versions of this clip. If you go to notyourinspiration.org, the video I have at the very top, I juxtaposed that clip with Stella Young's 2014 TED Talk to kind of drive home the point that this is cringy, gross shit that should not exist.
Yeah, no, I think you got a really good project here, both in terms of being a material like project and also a good cultural point to make. I was just gonna say, this is stupid, but it just reminded me of those targeted ads, and I keep getting, I don't know what, I mean, I guess, you know, they figure out what you're talking about and then they started just market stuff towards you, but I'm comedian, and it's all irony and stuff. So I've just broken the algorithm, and my Facebook has just been advertising like tactical belts and bulletproof vests and like shirts with like little cats on them, and then boner pills. And
nice.
I guess my point being, I'm glad that you followed through
You're like,
with your project in quarantine, and I didn't. Whatever the fuck that was supposed to be.
Dude, you went to jail. That's a way cooler project than anything I've done. So,
Yeah.
with mad respect for that.
Well,
you actually got out went out and protested. I unfortunately didn't. I really couldn't. I wanted to so bad, but I was like, fuck, man, that's not a smart idea, especially when I got a toddler. Like, I don't need to be out there getting myself
that's the thing.
killed.
I don't have any kids, so I can go be a dumbass about it. Risk getting COVID.
Well, I appreciate you being a dumbass for me, because I wanted to be out there with you, man.
Yeah, no, that's why I go out there and I just go extra hard, extra stupid.
Go hard.
So, because I know someone I know wants to and can't. Anyway,
right, I'm that guy. Think of me, man.
yeah, I don't know. This all makes a lot of sense. The inspiration porn thing is really interesting, and I think you've sort of isolated where it exists, which is kind of something analogous to, I guess, all things that get regurgitated, all struggles that get regurgitated through capitalism like this. It's kind of reminding me both of like, what if Hamilton was just everyone was in wheelchairs, and also of that game show where they pay off your student loans if you win, and then how are we supposed to feel about this, thing that is incredibly insufficient to the problem, but like kind of pats yourself on the back for understanding the struggle of like one person or something. Because I mean, I work in comedy, and it's, serious things are going down. There's a serious conversation happening regarding white supremacy in this country, and the answer to it is going to, in my industry, is going to be to hire a few people of color. And that's like this thing where you go, that's great, and I'm glad my friend got a job, but I know what you're doing. And I think it's this inspiration porn thing where everyone goes, we all feel good now we're not going to address the entire mode of distribution or whatever.
Right. And that's where Marta Russell's writings are great, because she really digs into this concept of how civil rights alone is not enough. Like, and those kind of affirmative action type things. I mean, they're great, right? Like, it's better than the nothing that we're doing now, but it's in no way a solution. Civil rights alone cannot accomplish the equality and justice that we actually are trying to seek, the liberation from oppression, because that oppression is not something that can be curbed by civil rights. It's the system itself is designed that way. So we need, obviously it's important to fight for those things, but at the same time we have to fight for the structural change too. And so that's where the centrists are like, yeah, let's do the fucking lipstick on the pig shit. Let's make it look good. And then not actually do anything to gut all the rot that exists, under there. Like, it's just, we're going to paint over it, and we're going to make it look good with some affirmative action hires, and it may marginally improve something, right? But I'm not about marginal change anymore, man. Like, fuck that.
There's no time.
No, I'm done with marginal change. It's dumb. It's a stupid concept. If you know what the right thing is, do it. That's like, it's just dumb. Like, I don't understand this. Like, well, Republicans have this fucking abhorrent position over here, but I'm going to meet them halfway with this semi-less abhorrent position, and we're going to call that a good thing. And like, that's not like that's to me not how debate or politics even is supposed to work. Like, it's supposed to be like, here's an idea. Oh, this is the better idea. Let's do that.
Yeah. You know what this has got me thinking about? I don't know why. This is like sort of, I'd say, adjacent to probably the issues that you face on a daily basis or whatever. But like, I can't remember what it was, like a comedian or somebody or something in a TV show at one point. This person is commenting on how our society is set up and how neglectful it is of like the elderly, and they're talking about the fact that like millions of years, or not millions, but like hundreds of years, sort of setting up this thing that that we live in that has all these insane technical brilliant things or whatever, and when you're old they give you a walker with the fucking tennis balls on the bottom, and it's like that shows you how we have priorities in the way that things are distributed, and the distribution there is the problem. And I think that's like a good way to explain socialism to people, because people I think of socialism as a form of government versus capitalism as a form of government, and it's kind of, but I think it's better understood as a form of distributing like goods and stuff like that, and power, and where research for fixing certain things is going to go. And like we don't take, once you're past a certain age, you're no longer part of what benefits our system of distribution of goods. So you just give you the fucking tennis balls and tell you to fuck off and die.
Basically, yeah, right. Because what you can't essentially. Our society has an equation that is over everybody's head, and that is how much can you contribute and how much do you take, and that those numbers are generally arbitrary and randomly decided by somebody and not really based in anything. But we still make a lot of decisions, like whether someone should have a job or not, based on those kind of things. And yeah, society basically is like, if you're no longer able to turn a profit for society, you can go die. You might as well just fuck off and die. Yeah, that's the essential message that we get. But there's so many ways that I think we can move in the right direction, and that's where you talk about exploring, talking about the nuances of socialism, and like I'm first of all, I'm a socialist in South Carolina, which imagine that, right? Like that's another fucking crazy thing. That's another fucking crazy thing I got to deal with, right? But like, when I explain it to people, I'm like, dude, I dislike the government probably just as much as I fucking dislike, crazy right wing shit. Like I'm not a fucking I'm a libertarian type socialist, man. Like socialism is not government by any means. Socialism is fucking democratic control of your life.
Right.
And like that's this movement, I think, not movement, it's not a movement. This project, if it ever became a movement, that'd be great. This project, I think, is to kind of try and emphasize that point, right? Like that change needs to happen. Or else we're going to be fighting the same fucking fight over and over again.
Yeah. Word, man. Well, listen, I think I got to wrap up here in a second, but go ahead and plug, man. Get your shit out there and let people know where they can, see your stuff and do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, man. I've only got 2 pluggables. That would be the website, notyourinspiration.org. I encourage everyone to stop there. And then check me out on Twitter. I'm at Adam F as in Frank, or Fogel, my former last name, Naughton, Naughton. I got married and took my wife's last name. I just love doing crazy shit.
Oh, it's badass, dude.
Yeah, man, all right. So
doing
Adam
the soy
F.
face
Naughton.
the whole time the preacher's talking or whatever.
Yeah, well, I made the decision like 6 months after, but
no, that rules though. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, I can get into that, but we have a stepson, so it was like it's easier for me to change my name than like other people change their names. So why should I not do it? But yes, Twitter at Adam F. Fogel, Naughton, Naughton. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for so much for coming on, and sorry about the rigmarole. For a listener, we were gonna do this like the week I got arrested, and then how shit just gets. You guys have heard the podcast. Every time we start, we're like, "Fuck, the gear's on fire again," and everything's a fucking mess, But we did it.
Did it.
All right, that's the episode. John Brown Part 3 coming next week. Probably with some more stuff like this, and that once again was a short interview with Adam F. Naughton, guy from South Carolina. Talking about his website, Not Your Inspiration. Funny guy. Right after we cut off, I always fucking accidentally do this. This is how podcasting works. Right after we stopped talking, we got into a conversation about what it would be like to fight Nathan J. Robinson. I've been playing a lot of video games, so I'm imagining him as like a boss, I guess, for some reason, where he like throws knives at you out of his suit and shit. I don't know. Anyways, that's the show. And what do we got? Patreon, bonus episodes. You can support us on Patreon and listen to our bonus content. We literally just do another episode every week. And our merch store is at poddownamerica.bigcartel.com. We have bandanas. Lower the prices because it was if you bought one early, I think I can sell them cheaper. I just had to pay off the initial price of like setting up the screen print and shit. You don't care about any of this stuff. Anyways, shop at our merch store, fucking support us on Patreon, or just hang out and listen if that's your thing too. All right, that's it. It's finished.